Trebuchet. This was a powerful type of catapult and siege weapon used in several variations from the 4th century BC until around the 15th century, when gunpowder weapons became more common and powerful. This gave the trebuchet over 1,000 years of relevance, giving it a revered place in history. These were not only powerful weapons, but icons of science and craftsmanship. Their construction and use was a spectacle in many ways, both beautiful and terrifying. Their mere presence alone could be enough to end a siege. Given how iconic the trebuchet is, it's no wonder it has appeared in many different shapes and forms in Hollywood and in video games, which has caused some confusion on how the weapon really was used. Unlike more ancient catapults that used tension or torsion energy to launch a projectile, trebuchets use the principles of leverage. Trebuchets quickly outmatch tension catapults in their ability to throw heavier projectiles at much greater ranges, and for large trebuchets, even outside the range of archers. The earliest form of trebuchet, often excluded from the movies and history lessons, is the mangonel, which instead of using counterweights, used traction to launch projectiles. The mangonel operated using manpower. Men would pull cords to swing the main lever. It should be noted that the term mangonel has been used as a general term for medieval stone-throwing artillery, so sometimes Roman catapults, or onager, are less accurately referred to as mangonel. To avoid confusion, many modern historians call mangonels traction trebuchets. Here is an example of a reproduction being used in France with a 4-man team. Examples of these go back as far as the 4th century BC in China. There are some depictions of teams of up to 30 men operating such mangonels. So if a 4-man team could launch a stone this far, 30 likely made for a powerful throw. The counterweight trebuchet became common around the 12th century in Asia, Europe, and the Middle East. These weapons have been described as a medieval superweapon of sorts, making other siege weapons such as the ram obsolete. Realistically, they were more of a tool used against the right type of fortifications. Their use was often dependent on resources and terrain. Counterweight trebuchets did not replace traction trebuchets. Counterweight trebuchets did require fewer men to operate, had greater range, and could fire larger projectiles. However, they took significant time to construct, which typically had to be done on the battlefield. Medieval engineers would transplant components to build a trebuchet: pulleys, metal reinforcements, rope, and sometimes lead counterweights. They were hard to move once constructed. Only minor adjustments could be made, such as shifting the channel the ball traveled along to adjust the shot left or right. They took a long time to reload. Traction trebuchets, however, could be easily taken down and moved along with an army. Sometimes these types of trebuchets would be used together, the large counterweight trebuchets targeting fortifications, while smaller traction trebuchets were set up to target enemy troops. Any sort of pivoting trebuchet, as shown here, would be destroyed under its own weight, for all but the smallest of designs. Counterweight trebuchets rely on potential energy from a slowly raised counterweight, which could be lead or a box filled with sand or stone. This is hoisted into the air while the long section of the lever or beam remains close to the ground, tethered to the projectile. Once the trebuchet weight is released, the beam rotates vertically through a wide arc. Because the projectile section of the beam is longer and further attached to a long sling that holds the projectile, the mechanical advantage is greatly increased. Ratios of the projectile side of the beam could be 3 to 6 times the length than on the ballast side of the axle. The mechanics of such a throw can be recreated using a stick with a sling, creating a hand trebuchet. The largest of trebuchets could obtain ranges greater than 350 meters, flinging a 100 kilogram or more stone. Counterweights could reach 30 metric tons. The largest of trebuchets could take weeks to build. These would be part of protracted sieges that lasted months. Great trebuchets, clearly visible by castle defenders, had the potential to demoralize the enemy. Castle defenders knew they could not strike back against a large trebuchet that could pick away at sections of a wall for days on end. Sometimes in the movies, these weapons are shown as firing a few shots before men rush a castle's walls. Instead, these weapons would have been allowed to fire for at least several days after being constructed for several weeks. Castles could use trebuchets in defense, but an attacker would simply have to gauge its range and essentially outbuild it in size. Large trebuchets worked best on stationary targets. In the movie The Outlaw King, a representation of the largest trebuchet ever built is shown, known as Warwolf. This was used during the Siege of Stirling in 1304. The design shows man-powered tread wheels, a common method used for hoisting or lifting great weight during this period. Warwolf was said to have been built over 3 months by 50 men. Sources say the Scots surrendered to Edward I of England before the weapon was finished, and that Edward decided to use it anyway, releasing one shot against the castle in a display of triumph. Design features of counterweight trebuchets vary. Wheels can help absorb some of the rocking force given off when a trebuchet is fired. Trebuchets can easily rock or shake themselves to pieces. Wheels can further help transfer momentum to a projectile, like a pitcher stepping into a throw. However, a sturdy base was sometimes the better design. Unbalanced wheels or uneven or soft terrain could also cause a trebuchet to rock or twist itself to pieces. Engineers had much to consider when designing and altering a trebuchet for the field. Adjustments and repairs were a constant with trebuchets. Adjustments to range were accomplished by adjusting the counterweight, the length of the sling used, and the size of the projectile. Trebuchets with swinging baskets were easier to adjust, as the counterweight could be adjusted by simply shoveling in or out sand. Trebuchets with fixed timbers and no basket often used lead counterweights, and such lead was expensive and hard to come by. Swinging counterweights also provided a mechanical advantage, allowing the counterweight to descend for longer in a straight line, harnessing more energy for the throw. Ammunition for trebuchets could take several forms. Chiseled stone was most common, but sewage, carcasses, and flammable projectiles were used. Common stone projectiles were carefully made to be the same size and weight to repeatedly and accurately target a section of wall. Masons making these projectiles might even have a gauge just for this purpose. The use of fire is often dramatized in movies. They make projectiles easier for a viewer to watch as they fly through the air. Though trebuchet projectiles could be and were lit on fire using flammable resins and tar, they did not explode quite like they are shown in the movies. The purpose of such flammable projectiles was to start a fire if they landed on anything flammable within a castle's walls. Though castles are made of stone, they still require significant wood and thatching in areas, and even had reserves of hay and straw for animals. Fire was still rarely used compared to how it is shown on film, particularly as fire ran the risk of destroying the expensive siege weapon itself. The command to launch a projectile was never fire, which was a gunpowder term. The scale of trebuchets used in battle in some movies is further an exaggeration, though not always. During the Crusades and at the siege of Acre in 1291, the Mamluk Sultanate fielded upwards to 92 trebuchets, but these would have been of various sizes and design, and not all such massive siege engines, as shown in the Kingdom of Heaven. Trebuchets have developed such a strong association with the medieval period, they have sometimes even taken the place of cannons in the movies. Joan of Arc, for example, would have battled with and against cannons, and not trebuchets. The director here no doubt felt trebuchets gave the film a more medieval feel, and thought, rightfully so, that they were cool. Alright, I'm Johnny. Thanks for swinging along until the end of the video. Take care, take cover, and have a nice rest of your day.